Congrats to HSRC Press on reaching 21. Publishers are scarce things these days. We've got to value them as the book gets less and less important in your hand. And yet for me, as an author and a historian, there's nothing as nice as feeling a book in my hand like that. And I've been very lucky to work with HSRC Press under the BestRed imprint for 10 years now. And it's been an incredible experience, and I value the relationship as well as the mere fact that you guys have published my books. In addition to the 3 books that we see here, and there are 2 coming next year, so that would be 5 of my own personal books, I've also got a relationship with HSRC Press in joint projects and publications with my African Live series. So 10 years ago, after over 20 years running organizations as a CEO and feeling very drained, and my last contract ended, I asked my wife if she would mind if I could go back to my first love, which is history, and if I could just spend a year or a couple of years reading and writing, just catching up again with history, which in the post-democracy demand for one to become an administrator, not only demand but also a beautiful opportunity and moments for us to live through. I just wanted to get back to history and thinking and reading and reconnecting with my own work for my master's and my PhD and my first books. And she said, sure, and I called that a kind of second PhD that I wanted to do. And she said, go ahead. And those 1 or 2 years have now become 10 years of writing full-time.
The role of the commissioning editor is absolutely crucial. The commissioning editor is your shepherd, takes the author through the entire process, challenges the author to rewrites some of the stuff. As an example, the commissioning editor knows who the readership is. Academics very rarely have a sense of who their readerships are. You understand the market as the publisher. So therefore, to have a committed, energetic and hands-on commissioning editor is the first base. Okay, so that's the first thing. The second thing, of course, is the marketing. Many companies now seem to have just digital marketing. They don't seem to have the wider activities that publishers used to have, launches and what have you. And then, of course, the distribution. And certainly my impression in browsing the web is that HSRC Press has links with all kinds of distributors across the world and other publishers, De Gruyter, and I think Lynn Renier is one of the key ones. And I remember having tete-a-tetes with Mtunzi about, I'm tired of all these reviewers now, I want to get on with this, you know. And he just counseled me through it. Said, no, we're going to get this done. This is what you need to do. So I think in our digital world, academics have become impatient. Universities are becoming impatient for us to meet our targets. The result is that the quality of work that is put into manuscripts is dropping dramatically. I see this on my journals every day. Both of those books I wrote, I rewrote again. I rewrote each one 15, 20 times, also in response to the reviewers. And I'd put it aside for a month, and then I'd dig it out of my bottom drawer and I'd re-edit it again. And eventually, as the author, you have to stop editing and say, I've got to hand this now over to the publisher, knowing full well that the publisher has a competent copy editor who will then take it to the next phase. So when I inform my students that even for a 6,000 word article, I might rewrite that article 15, 20 times over a period of a month or 40 years, they are astonished. Otherwise, there's no way of getting quality. And now with AI, you have to put in even more work to keep your own voice, because the artificial intelligence will steal your voice, rewrite it for somebody else, and you've lost your personality, your personal signature in the writing. Authors have to become part of the marketing process, and few authors want to do that because they want to move on to their next project. They're not rewarded now for sales or exposure or for impacting the discipline. They're rewarded for the next paper that they publish in a so-called accredited journal that earns income for their university. The impact that I measure my work by is by identifying likely reviewers, the best that are available in the fields, and then waiting to see what they write. And I think in both cases, the reviewers have come up with extraordinarily positive evaluations and even, in fact, continuations. And even the reviewers I didn't know, like those in Australia, actually found the positive in relation to their own context. And that they immediately globalized those points. So my measurement is the impact on the discipline, and that's not necessarily in terms of citations. It's in terms of adoption by readers. The problem with the current output-orientated reward systems for academics is that we tick the box, we've got the target, got the output, but we forget about the readers. Who is reading your work? And the reading of that work will continue in perpetuity. And so over a period of 20, 40, 50, 100 years, what is the impact?
If you look at the back catalogue of HSRC Press, it's a lot of very serious work, and particularly on contemporary South African affairs, but also historical stuff. And so we thought, this is a publisher which will take our work seriously. When I say we, all the three books were collaborations. The first one with a Brazilian colleague, the second one with a Mozambican colleague, and the last one with my longtime collaborator, who's an Englishman, but who lives has lived in Mozambique since 1978. So, that was the experience. I mean, we worked with copy editors and people who read the text critically and said this bit doesn't make sense, or maybe you need to adjust this a little bit. Yes. And you include photographs in the books, which in a history book it really brings it alive. A picture is worth 1,000 words. Yes. So overall, I mean, there were hiccups and so on, but overall it was a very good. It's been a very good experience. The Samora Michel book originally was much smaller, was seen as being much smaller, but it gradually expanded. And I'm happy to say that HSRC Press didn't make too much of a fuss about that. It turned out to be a much bigger book than originally planned.
The executives at HSRC Press guided me through the process from start to finish. And I think the outcome was a book that I still get very good reviews about and good feedback. And it was an easy read, but it also gave people a background into what it's like to be a newspaper editor in a country and a city as complex as ours.
My first book with the HSRC Press was Teenage Tata. And that has actually become the book that is most cited, and probably the book that most students and young people know me for. When I joined the HSRC, Baba had just been published, Linda Richter and her team. And I was so inspired, and Linda said to me, Sharlene, why don't you look at young fathers? We've looked at fatherhood in South Africa in general, why don't you look at young fathers? So that was the beginning of my journey with the press, and it was a very quick publication based on the research that we had done and funded by Save the Children. And I was really attracted by the fact that it was open access and that people would get it, university students would get it, and people would read it. I think I'd been really put off this issue of you write journal articles, you write books, and nobody reads it. And when I came and met the press, it's open access, fast turnaround, we'll help you market it, we'll help you get interviews, and that was really good for me as a young scholar.
a lot of the publications before the press was established, which were outsourced to private companies, Owen Burgess was one of them, were actually quite interesting because they were expensive productions, they were hardcover, but they were also, the chapters were also mostly written by internal HSRC authors, but they were actually tracking change, shifts. And it was the HSRC, remember, in 1982 through the Intergroup Relations Project, despite all its conservatism, that sounded the intellectual death knell of apartheid. So the subsequent press arises out of that moment. And I think its choice of manuscripts, its prominence within the local arena, its participation in the National Scholarly Book Publishers Forum and Publishers Association of South Africa, and the willingness to engage in issues around the Copyright Bill, for example, place that press very prominently within national policy debates also. So it's producing work, it's enabling all kinds of authors to get published, and it's targeted at a local readership but also reaches an international readership. As we know, the Copyright Amendment Bill, in the context of wider national economic policy, is seriously affecting the viability of the local industry. And the small group of pro-bill advocates who have not engaged a single sentence of the tens of thousands of pages written by the legal fraternity and other commentators on asking for modifications to the bill to make it viable. They haven't responded to a single sentence. They talk in cliches all the time. A bit like Trump, talking cliches, rouse up the people who don't want to think the consequences through for themselves, let alone for the industry, and work on a populist support base to impose a bill that is not going to work, that in fact is already killing the industry because it's on hold, waiting for outcome now from the Constitutional Court. And I think that just this might be a bit superfluous, but to go back to my previous comment, HSRC Press knows where its bread is buttered, and it has taken the necessary stands in the relevant fora to make the point that we need a totally revised bill. And your managing director, Jeremy Watman, has been at the center of that, along with other university press executives.
What they helped with immensely was taking my writing style as a journalist and crafting it into a narrative form that I didn't want to make the book preachy and put my own values attached to what the people were saying in these narratives, but I wanted to leave the reader with something to ponder, something to think about our society, and I let the characters in the book do the talking. I think the book created a positive impact in the sense that it gave the reader a better understanding of what happens behind the scenes in a newspaper. Particularly newspapers, because that's where I have most of my editorial experience as a newspaper editor of both the Cape Argus and the Cape Times.
The other 6 books are all different. Some of them have been based on my research studies, so Old Enough to Know. We did a study on children and sex education on the African continent, and again, open access was really important. Moral Eyes was another research study. Studying While Black was a 5-year research study. So those 4 were all based on current studies. And then 2 edited books. The one is Society, Research and Power, which we did was as a history of the HSRC with Crane Sedan and Gregory Euston. And that was an edited collection. And then the other edited collection, which just came out recently, is Transformative Leadership in African Context, and one that I'm really proud of because, again, it's substantial. 20 authors from across the continent, really important. And then the last book that I want to talk about, which was done in 2016, so 8 years ago, Another Country, Everyday Social Restitution. it was a single authored book. I went off on sabbatical, I wrote it, I came back to the press and I said, this is a message that I think is important for the country. And the imprint BestRed was the one that the publishing board decided that it would be published through. And it's been my most public book. And partly because it was written not as a completely academic book, although it was based on research, but it was about strong messages on restitution. So my work is in two areas, restitution and change in our country, and young people. And so almost all of my books are in that vein with some nuances and inflections.
After being in institutions for 20 years, I'm finding my way back into publishing and reading and working from home and writing. And I got in touch with Jeremy Watman, and I must say I absolutely, 10 years later, treasure the relationship and friendship with him. And you know, no ego, very earnest and very, very productive we've been together. So besides these three, with 2 more coming, I've also done the 10 already now, that it will be by next year, together with HSRC Press, BestRed. Yeah, besides the ones I've written. My own title is, my own numbers, over a dozen already, but there's going to be 5 by HSRC Press in 10 years, which is phenomenal. And they're 5 possible because of the support HSRC Press has given me. So I remember very clearly in writing Divided Country that to bring it out in the time we wanted in the new year, this had to be ready like middle of December. And Charlotte, what's her surname again? Charlotte Imani, sorry, I can't believe I didn't come straight to that, basically edited all 3 books for me. So that is a particularly special thing. And when I tell you about this story, you'll see why. Her son was going to go and live in New Zealand, and she was spending the last Christmas with him before he left. And this book had to be in the middle of December to be printed in time for March, April, whatever. And she wrote the final edits for me, not on Christmas Eve, on Christmas night, on the night of Christmas Day. And I mean, I was not expecting it, but she was so obligated to fulfilling the kind of idea of finishing the book that she did it on Christmas night with her son leaving to go overseas the next day permanently. That's the kind of commitment. But it's beyond commitment, it's also friendship and a treasuring of the book and what it means to write a book. So I can only say that in nearly 50 years now of publishing, this is one of my most special relationships that I've had. And you know, so 21 years, wonderful democracy. We're lucky to be able to be writing.
I worked for a number of years in the African Studies Library at UCT. And so we knew, you know, that this is a press that produces serious books, which we added to the collection and so on. So I hope that HSRC keeps supporting the press, funds it better, and I would also like to see the remit of the press expanded to cover other Southern African countries, not just Mozambique and South Africa, but perhaps Angola, Lesotho, Zimbabwe, and so on. Because as I said before, we're not the only country, and I think to understand South Africa, you have to understand Southern Africa.
I just want to thank HSRC Publishing for holding my hand through the process. It was incredible advice and guidance, and I never felt I was being exploited in terms of, you hear horror stories about publishers, but here was a publishing house that really cared about my well-being and my writing and the process, and really cared about the project. I didn't feel like they were pushing me to write a bestseller that's going to be in the window of exclusive books or any of the mainstream news publications. I think HSRC Publishing holds an important space in society. It's more than just the Harry Potter book that's going to sell tens and millions of books, but it creates space for other kinds of narratives that are important to our society, that needs to shape the conversation. And it often takes risks, and I think those risks are important for writers.
I remember the first one at the Cape Town International Convention Centre, walking in and seeing a couple of my books on the stand and feeling really proud of it. And I suppose that for me was important, that the press has got an international footprint, and that whether it was in Germany at the African Studies Conference or whether it was in Edinburgh, there the press was with a beautiful stand and quite a lot of promotion. And I used to very happily stand there and speak to people about my books. And so even, 18 years ago, it just hasn't got old, because it's a platform to engage with people who are reading your books, but also people who are interested in social change in South Africa, on the African continent.
And there's so much beauty and energy that can be gained from telling these stories and bringing out books like this, So, and not only rewriting history, but also doing it very well. And I mean, if you read Cricket and Conquest, and this is also because of the kind of support I had from HSRC Press. The Professor Tony Collins, the former director of the International Centre for Sports History, wrote, "Cricket and Conquest is simply the finest book ever written about sport in South Africa." He's won several British awards for sports history. And Ashwin Desai, Cricket and Conquest bowls over prevailing history, decolonizing existing narratives of the game in a matter that does not seek to consolidate an innings, but opens up the field of study. So a book that covers a broad canvas, but when there are master craftsmen at the wicket, refusing to get bogged down, throwing all that came before into a spin, you read with buoyant anticipation and wonder, knowing that what was will never be the same. So it's a very serious project to be involved in writing history in South Africa. And we have to, it's part of that massive societal-wide focus and energy that we need to give content to our democracy.
I've had different experiences. So some of the books have been kind of the edited versions that have been long, and it's taken a while because it's had so many contributors, and that's been a long process, and the peer review process has been rigorous and therefore substantial. Some of my work based on my research studies has been quite quick. Because I know the press, because I'm in close proximity to the press, the discussion with the editorial board or with the publisher himself has been quite seamless. And then with BestRed, that's been also quite easy because it goes through a different process of peer review. And so all of those things, it's been tailored to the kinds of things and the kinds of outputs that I've needed.
The last one was under a considerable amount of time pressure. We were protesting that it was too quick, not that it was too slow. But yeah, the production process was generally okay, and the cover design and that kind of thing, we were consulted. Yes. I remember we were consulted, there were I think 6 cover designs for the historical dictionary. Yes. And my co-author and I decided there were 2 that we really liked, and so we said we really like those. And then eventually some committee decided to choose one of the other ones, but it wasn't one of the, we'd rejected 2 out, we said no, those 2 definitely. So the one that got chosen was one which was fine. Most South African scholars don't really, except for a few specialists, don't really know a lot about Mozambique. Mozambique is our neighbour, and the history of Mozambique is completely intertwined. You know, labour migration, the railway routes, the history of the struggle in both in South Africa and in Mozambique. You can't separate those histories. And so one of my passions is to, how shall I say, to contribute to the knowledge by writing in English about that history of our neighbouring country, because we're not the only country in the southern tip of Africa.
Yes.
And people think, oh, Portuguese is a big language barrier, but it's not necessarily. I mean, one can learn enough Portuguese to function.
It was a hard process in the sense that it was an awakening for me in terms of what is relevant, in terms of a unique selling point for a book. It's not just as easy as sticking a manuscript in and people will automatically see your vision. It needs guidance from professionals, and I got that from HSRC Publishing. Through every step of the way, they guided me along the process. If anything, I was impatient. I wanted to see the project through and get it out there as soon as possible. It was also a tough time. It was during COVID. And I managed to get 3 launches going in Cape Town, Durban and Johannesburg, and also Pretoria.
I always feel really proud that my work has been published with the press. I kind of wish that they would keep some of the publications in print. I think sometimes the publications go out, and it does cost money to reprint, I understand that. But yeah, I've just been very proud to be associated with the press. And let me just go back to the issue of open access. I remember asking the publisher at the time, how do you make money if it's open access? And you don't charge me anything, how do you make money? And one of the really interesting statistics was that when books are open access published, often the hard copy sales go up. And it's because people read it on their computer or their iPad, and then they want a real copy. And I thought that that was such a lovely lesson to capitalism, that the more you give it away, the more you'll actually get income from it. And so that for me was great, that it's a win-win. That if you just want it as a reference, get it open access. But if you want it as a permanent source of inspiration on your shelf, then get the real copy.
I just want to say congratulations to HSRC Publishing. For 21 years of publishing. I mean, that is an incredible feat in terms of the society we live in. Yes. We know that people are very reluctant to buy and read books, but books are incredible. The feel of a physical book compared to a Kindle is so important, and I think long live HSRC Publishing. It cares about its authors and its readers, and congratulations on an exceptional milestone.
The other thing that's been really important is to have the services of a professional team. Copy editors, they give you so much more work to do, but in the end, when I read some of my books, I can't believe I've written it. And I did write it, but it's been polished by the copy editors and by editorial comment and by peer reviewers. And that's just made the quality so much better than if I just self-published it, or if I'd gone to a press that doesn't take great care and concern with books.
Tunzi and the HSRC team there, Anthea and Colin and Sam and Shunice, didn't just make this to look nice here in the front. We must try and sell some of them for them. Thanks for the publishers.
Thanks to the colleagues at HSRC for carrying this project until now, and thanks to everybody who's here, the leadership, the minister, deputy minister, and the friends and colleagues who are here.
So just to end, thanks very much again to HSRC Press and the BestRed team. Happy birthday, and Jeremy Watman, I will miss you immensely, and thanks for those 10 years of very close working together in productive ways. Tunzi Ngawe, quiet guy but full of humor and thinking in the background. Charlotte Imani was my editor in these 3 books and has been amazing. Anthea Westhuizen is currently the project manager, just met 3 weeks ago, but already in finishing the Leguma book, which will be the next one, I can see the incredible professionalism there that's going to make that a special book. And Samantha Ohane and all the team that does the work around the editing, including Shanice here.